The kitchen goes quiet the second I walk in. My sister's hand is still on my husband's arm, and she doesn't even move it when she sees me standing in the doorway with my phone raised. "You were gone," Yara says, looking at me like I'm the one who did something wrong. What did you expect him to do? Wait forever, like some kind of monk? Behind her, on the counter, sits a stack of bank statements with my name on them that I never opened. Tonight, in front of every person who ever called us family, my sister was about to find out that some doors don't stay open forever, and some deployments end sooner than anyone plans. 3 years before that night, I was Sergeant Helena Voss, 6 months into my first deployment overseas, lying on a cot writing an email to my husband about grocery money and gutter cleaning. Trace and I had been married 2 years. We bought a small house outside of town, the kind with a crooked porch step neither of us ever fixed, and when my orders came through, the hardest part wasn't leaving him. It was knowing he'd be alone in that house with nobody checking on him. That's when I called my sister. Yara was 26, between jobs again, living in an apartment she couldn't quite afford on her own. She'd always been the one who needed help, not the one who gave it. But she was my sister, and Trace liked her well enough, and it felt like the obvious answer. "Just check in on him," I told her over a crackling video call. "Make sure he's eating something other than cereal. Help him with bills if he needs it. You're better with that stuff than he is." "Of course," she said. "That's what family's for." I believed her. I had no reason not to. She started coming by twice a week, then it became every day. Then it became her spare key sitting on our kitchen counter, like it had always belonged there. In my letters home, Trace mentioned her constantly. Yara fixed the router, found a better rate on the electric bill, made dinner because he'd had a long shift. I remember feeling relieved. I remember writing back, "Thank God she's there." I didn't know yet that "there" was becoming a permanent address. The first crack came about 4 months in, though I didn't recognize it as one at the time. He stopped mentioning his best friend, a guy named Barrett he'd known since high school, who used to come over on Sundays for football. I asked about him in a call home, and he just said, "We drifted, I guess. Different schedules." When I asked Yara about it later, she said, "Honestly, Barrett was kind of a bad influence, always trying to get him out drinking. I think it's better this way." I remember thinking that was strange, but I was 8,000 miles away with a rifle and a job to do, and strange wasn't the same as wrong. By month 6, Yara had a key to the safe deposit box, too. Trace told me this casually, like it was nothing, like handing over access to our joint savings was just a practical solution because she's better at organizing paperwork than I am. She started attending his family dinners even when he couldn't make it. She started answering his phone when I called and he was in the shower, chatting with me for 5-10 minutes before handing it over, filling the silence so smoothly I never had a chance to feel the gap. Looking back, that's exactly what she was doing. Filling gaps. Becoming the connective tissue of his life so thoroughly that by the time I noticed anything missing, she wasn't an addition anymore. She was the architecture. Around the 8-month mark, the calls started getting shorter. He'd sound distracted, distant, like he was reading responses off a script instead of actually talking to me. I asked him once, straight out, "Is everything okay? You feel far away lately." And he laughed it off. "Just tired, babe. Work's been a lot." I wanted to believe him so badly that I did. What I didn't know was that by then, Yara wasn't just managing his schedule. She was managing his feelings. She'd sit with him some nights after work, the two of them going through the bills at the kitchen table, and somewhere between refinancing conversations and grocery budgets, she started saying things like, "Do you ever feel like she left you to handle all this alone?" Small comments. Little seeds. I just think it's a lot to ask someone to hold down a whole house and a marriage by himself. Never anything you could point to and call outright betrayal. Just a slow drip, wearing down the stone. By month 10, they'd started going to lunch together during his breaks. Nothing dramatic, just two people who'd become each other's default. Then it became dinner some nights when it didn't make sense for her to cook a separate meal at her own place. Then it became her practically living there, technically still paying rent on an apartment she barely used. I found out about the joint account changes almost by accident. I was doing my own budgeting from my bunk one night, trying to plan for when I'd finally get leave, and I logged into an account I hadn't checked in weeks. $12,000 had been moved out over the course of 2 months, routed through a separate account I didn't recognize. I called Trace immediately, my heart hammering. Hey, I saw some transfers on the account. $12,000, what's that for? There was a pause just half a second too long. Oh, yeah, Yara's been helping me consolidate some things. Interest rates and stuff. She said it's smarter to keep it liquid somewhere else while she looks into some better options. Better options for what? I don't know, Hal. Home stuff. Renovations, maybe. She's got it handled. She's got it handled. That phrase sat wrong in my stomach for days. My husband was talking about our money like it belonged to someone else's judgment now, not ours. I didn't say anything else about it that call. I told myself I was being paranoid, that distance does strange things to trust, that I'd sort it out when I got home in a few months like planned. But the seed was planted, and it didn't take long to grow. 2 weeks later, my mother called me. Not Trace, not Yara, my mother, during one of my rare moments of decent signal. Halina, honey, I don't want to worry you, she said in the tone that meant she absolutely wanted to worry me. But Yara mentioned something at dinner last week. She said Trace has been looking at apartments. My whole body went cold. Apartments? What apartments? She said it real casual, like it was normal. Something about him wanting his own space to think. I figured you two must have talked about it. We hadn't talked about anything. Not a single word about apartments, about space, about thinking. I called Trace that same night, and when I asked him directly, "Are you looking at apartments?" his answer told me everything I needed to know without actually answering the question. It's not what you think. It's just, I've had a lot of time to think out here, and things feel different. I don't know how to explain it over the phone. Then explain it in person, I said, my voice shaking, because I'm hearing about my own marriage from my mother, not from you. He didn't have an answer for that. He just said he needed time, and I lay awake that night doing math in my head. The $12,000, the missing friend, the apartment listings, the sister who'd gone from checking in twice a week to becoming the axis his entire life now spun around. I put in for emergency leave the next morning. I told my command it was a family matter. That wasn't a lie. My friend Raina, who'd served with me for 2 years and knew my situation better than anyone, helped me get the paperwork moving fast. You think it's what I think it is? She asked, watching my face while I filled out forms. I don't know, I said, but I know I'm not finding out over a phone line anymore. I didn't tell Trace I was coming home. I didn't tell my sister either. As far as either of them knew, I was still 8 months out, still a name on a screen they could manage from a distance. I wanted to walk through that door and see with my own eyes exactly what my life had become without me in it. The flight home felt endless. I kept running through every version of what I might find. Maybe nothing. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Yara really was just helping, and Trace really was just tired and stretched thin. Some small, stubborn part of me wanted that to be true so badly it made my chest hurt. I landed at close to midnight, took a car straight from the base to our house instead of calling ahead, and let myself in with my own key, the porch step creaking exactly the way it always had. The living room was dark except for the blue flicker of the television. On the couch, close enough that there was no innocent explanation for the space between them, sat my husband and my sister, her legs pulled up, his arm along the back of the couch behind her, both of them frozen the second the door opened. Nobody said anything for what felt like a full minute. Halina, Trace finally managed, standing up so fast he nearly knocked over a glass on the coffee table. What are you doing here? You said you weren't coming back until... I got emergency leave, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My eyes went to my sister, who hadn't moved from the couch, who was looking at me with something that wasn't quite guilt. It was closer to annoyance, like I'd interrupted something. Yara, comfortable? It's not what it looks like, she said, standing now too, smoothing her shirt down like that would fix anything. We were just watching a movie. I stayed late because... Because what? I asked. Because you basically live here now? Nobody answered that. I walked past both of them into the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. A second phone charging on the counter that wasn't Trace's, mail addressed to Yara at this address, not her apartment. I picked up an envelope, an actual piece of forwarded mail with my sister's name printed above my street. "When did you start getting mail here?" I asked, holding it up. Trace opened his mouth, closed it again. Yara crossed her arms. "It's just easier," she said. "I'm here so much it made sense to forward some things." I laughed, and it wasn't a happy sound. "It made sense," I repeated. "Right, of course it did." I didn't blow up that night. That's the part people don't expect when I tell this story. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry in front of them. I went and slept in the guest room, and the next morning, before either of them woke up, I did something I hadn't thought about in over a year. I checked the home security app on my phone. We'd installed cameras before I deployed, mostly for the porch and the driveway. Cheap peace of mind for a house that would sit half empty. I hadn't looked at that footage in months and figured the subscription had lapsed. But when I opened the app that morning, sitting in the guest room with the door locked, months of footage sat there waiting for me, quietly recorded, quietly saved. Because Trace, trying to be thoughtful, ironically, had renewed the subscription without ever mentioning it to me. There was no single dramatic clip that broke the case wide open. Just hours of small, damning normalcy. Yara's car in the driveway at 7 in the morning, still there past midnight, night after night. The two of them walking out together, laughing, her hand brushing his arm in a way that had nothing to do with fixing a router. A clip from the porch camera, clear as day, of them standing close together after dark, her head tilting up toward him just before the frame cut off. Financial notification pop-ups I'd never seen, synced to an email I didn't check anymore, showing transfers, showing a new account opened jointly between Trace and Yara. Not me, her. With a balance that made my stomach turn. And then, near the most recent footage, a clip that didn't need any interpretation at all. The two of them in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table, a laptop open showing apartment listings, Yara pointing at the screen and saying, clear as anything on that recording, "This one has 2 bedrooms. We could make the second one an office until you're ready to tell her." Until you're ready to tell her. They weren't planning an accident. They were planning an exit. My sister had been helping my husband quietly build a life to leave me for, using money that was half mine, in a house I was still paying a mortgage on from a war zone. I sat in that guest room for almost an hour, just breathing, letting the anger settle instead of erupt. Somewhere in that hour, I stopped thinking about revenge and started thinking about proof. Because I knew exactly how this family worked. My mother, my father, my aunts. They loved Yara. She'd always been the charming one, the one who could talk her way out of anything. If I came at her with accusations and no receipts, she'd spin it, cry, make herself the victim, and I'd be the bitter soldier wife who couldn't handle distance. I needed something nobody in that family could argue with. So I didn't confront them that morning. I smiled at breakfast. I let Trace think the storm had passed. I spent the next 4 days quietly pulling everything together, downloading footage clips to a private drive, printing bank statements, screenshotting the joint account Yara had opened, even pulling call logs that showed exactly how often she'd been managing his phone during my deployment calls. I reached out to Barrett, Trace's old friend, and asked him one simple question. "Did you two have a falling out, or did someone push you out?" His answer confirmed everything. "Man, I tried calling for months. Yara always answered, said he was busy, said maybe give him some space. Eventually, I just stopped trying. Figured he didn't want to talk to me anymore." He hadn't drifted away from his best friend. He'd been quietly, carefully cut off from him. My parents were hosting a family dinner that weekend. A welcome home dinner for me, technically, planned before I'd found any of this, with aunts and uncles and cousins all coming to celebrate the soldier home safe from war. I decided that was exactly where this would happen. Not privately, not quietly. In front of everyone who had watched my sister smile through years of favoritism and charm, who would finally see, undeniably, what she actually was. Which brings us back to that kitchen. My sister's hand still on my husband's arm, the two of them cornered by a room full of family and a phone in my hand that I was about to press play on. You were gone, Yara said again, like repeating it made it truer. What did you expect him to do? Wait forever like some kind of monk? I expected him to talk to me, I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, instead of letting my own sister plan an apartment for the two of them behind my back. The room went dead silent. My mother's fork actually clattered onto her plate. That's not, she's exaggerating, Trace said quickly, but his voice cracked on the word exaggerating, and everyone heard it. I set my phone down on the counter, propped against the fruit bowl, and pressed play. The porch camera footage filled the small screen, grainy but unmistakable. The two of them, close, her hand sliding up his arm, the same gesture I'd just watched her do 30 seconds earlier in real life. Then the living room clip, papers on the table, her voice clear as a bell. This one has 2 bedrooms. We could make the second one an office until you're ready to tell her. My aunt gasped. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped back across the floor. My mother just stared at Yara with an expression I'd never seen her wear before, not anger yet, just a slow, sinking recognition. $12,000 moved into an account with her name on it. I continued, pulling out the printed statements and setting them down next to the phone, one after another, like cards in a losing hand I was finally forcing someone else to see. A joint account Trace opened with my sister while I was overseas. Mail forwarded to this address. Calls she answered so I wouldn't notice he'd stopped picking up his own phone. His best friend of 15 years, frozen out because she decided he was, quote, a bad influence. Yara, is this true? My mother asked, and her voice had gone very quiet, very flat. It's not as simple as she's making it sound, Yara said, but nobody in that kitchen was buying it anymore. You could feel the room tilting away from her in real time, aunts exchanging looks, my father's jaw tight, my cousin quietly setting down her own phone, like she didn't even want to be caught filming this. He was lonely, Yara tried again, weaker this time. I was just there for him. Someone had to be. You were supposed to help him manage the house, I said, not manage him out of his marriage. Trace hadn't said a word in almost a minute. When he finally spoke, it wasn't the apology I half expected. It was worse in its own quiet way. I didn't mean for it to become this, he said. It just happened. Things like this don't just happen, Trace, I said. You looked at apartments, you moved money, you cut off your own best friend because it was easier than admitting what you were doing. None of that just happens. My father was the one who finally broke the silence in a way that mattered. He looked at Yara, and his voice was low, controlled, the kind of angry that's scarier than shouting. You get your things and you leave my house tonight, he said, and don't call your mother for a while. She needs time. Yara looked around the room for anyone to take her side, and found nothing but lowered eyes and folded arms. Even my youngest cousin, barely out of college, wouldn't look at her. She grabbed her bag off the counter and walked out without another word, and the door didn't slam. It just clicked shut, quiet and final, which somehow felt worse for her than any dramatic exit could have. Trace stayed. I think some part of him thought staying in the room meant something, like enduring the aftermath in front of my family bought him partial forgiveness. It didn't. I told him, calm as I could manage, that I wanted him out of the house by the end of the week, that I'd already spoken to a lawyer about the joint accounts and the money that had been moved without my knowledge, and that whatever he thought he and my sister had built together, he was going to have to build it without a single dollar of mine funding it. Helena, please, he said, can we talk about this without everyone? You had a whole deployment to talk to me, I said. You chose silence instead. I'm not choosing silence anymore. The divorce took a little over 4 months to finalize, and thanks to the financial records I'd pulled together, the settlement wasn't close to fair for him. The court saw exactly how those funds had moved, exactly who they'd moved to, and exactly what they'd been used to plan. He kept his name off that lease he and Yara had been eyeing. As far as I know, they didn't end up together anyway. Some things built on someone else's ruins don't hold weight once the excitement of getting away with it disappears. My sister didn't come to Thanksgiving that year, or the year after. My mother still isn't sure where things stand between them, and honestly, neither am I. I don't regret what I did at that dinner table, laying it all out where nobody could look away. I just regret that it took a camera I forgot was even running to show me who both of them really were. If you've ever had someone you trusted turn your own life into something unrecognizable while your back was turned, I want to hear how you found out and what you did when you did. Drop your story in the comments, and if this one hit home, hit subscribe because there's always another ending nobody sees coming.